Facebook. Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of our look a little bit deeper into Chanukah and the secret this evening and the power, even more importantly, of the menorah, the famous lights that we light every single year to celebrate this 8-day holiday of Chanukah. What is the secret of the menorah? Actually, we don't actually light a menorah. We light a Chanukah, which we'll see is going to represent the 8 days of miracles that happened for the Jewish people at this time. Just a quick recap, those who missed last week. We spoke about how we're now in the middle of the Second Temple period, 200 years after many of the Jews went back to Israel to rebuild the Second Temple. And we spoke about how Alexander the Great from Macedonia came in to the land of Israel and really took over the country. Eventually, at a very young age, he died, and his entire kingdom, which covered a large area of land throughout the Middle East, was divided among 4 different rulers and leaders. One of them eventually became Antiochus IV, who was, in short, a tyrant, dictator, and not really a great friend of the Jews, which Alexander the Great had been. Now the Jewish people were in trouble. And the trouble, we said last week, was because the Greeks were very learned and really appreciated studying and reading. And they even appreciated our Torah. However, what they did to the Torah was unforgivable. They wanted to strip away all the spirituality which we, the Jewish people, invest in our Torah, and they wanted to turn it into just another academic text, just another form of knowledge that they could just add to their quote-unquote, their libraries and their study houses. And that's when things between the Jewish people and the Greeks became problematic. And this entire philosophical battle between Jews and Greeks came to a head with a physical battle from a small group of Jews. Actually, we mentioned last week, there were priests, there were Kohanim from a family, and they were led by Matityahu, who, as part of the Maccabees, I think the word Maccabee actually means a hammer, because he was someone who really came to fight back. But these were students. These were Torah teachers. These weren't even people who worked land, because the Kohanim, the priests, didn't even own land in Israel. They were dependent upon their living from the rest of the Jewish people. And yet they were the ones who stood up to fight back. Because at one point, and this is going to be the key of today's discussion, the Greeks entered into the temple, our holy temple, and they defiled it, and they turned into a gymnasium, and they brought in forbidden animals for consumption, and did a lot of other bad things. And they picked on one object in there in particular, and that was the menorah. And the menorah was lit every single day by the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. And that went right back to even before the Jewish people were in Israel. When they were in the Midbar, one of the mitzvot of the Torah, which Moshe Rabbeinu himself fulfilled, was to create a golden menorah. And the light of that menorah represented a number of things. One of them was God's presence. When you wanted to feel God's presence, you went to look at the menorah. And the menorah was carried with the Jewish people for 40 years. And eventually was taken into the land of Israel. And when King Solomon built his temple, he put the golden menorah inside. And the Torah itself tells us that it faced the Holy of Holies at a very special position in the Mishkan, and then eventually in the temple that was built by King Solomon. And then the temple was destroyed. And when they went back, they rebuilt the menorah and they put it back into pride of place, right there in the epicenter. So now you had Jerusalem that was high. And then you had Harabayit, Mount Moriah, which is even higher. And then you had the temple, the beautiful temple that was built high, even higher. And the windows of the temple were inverted. Let me explain what I mean by that. You see, windows are basically just holes in the wall that used to capture light from outdoors and bring them in. But what they did was they actually bent the windows the other way and built them the other way. So they were narrow on the inside and wide on the outside. So the light of the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash would shine out. Not light from out in, but the light of the menorah, the spiritual light that we said represented God's constant presence, could be seen for miles away throughout Jerusalem. And while you're walking around Jerusalem, you feel down, a little bit depressed, right? Is God really with me? I've got a job, I've got business, I've got family problems, health, whatever it is. You would look up onto the mountain and see the beautiful temple, and the light of the menorah would shine out. This light that was lit every single day, this 7-branch candelabra that the high priest would go in and fill with olive oil every single day and lighten up. But the light of menorah represented something else. Not just God's constant presence, but also this light represented the Torah. The Torah, hi ora. Torah is light. It guides us. It illuminates. And therefore, when they saw the menorah, they also said, wow, we have this beautiful Torah that's stored there in the Holy of Holies. And we need to connect to it. And we need to learn more. And we need to appreciate the reasons and the background for all the mitzvot. And so the Torah represented two things. Number one, God's presence. But number two, the Torah. But not any Torah, my friends. And listen very, very carefully. Because there was a Torah in the temple. And that was the written Torah, which was in the ark. There are opinions that the ark did not have presence in the second temple. But the written Torah was represented by the luchot, the tablets, and the first ever Torah of Moses that was kept inside the Aron, the ark. Well, if that's true, if the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, was kept in the ark, in the temple all the time, then why do you need a menorah to represent Torah as well? Why are there 2 objects representing the Torah when there's only one Torah? And the answer to that, my friends, is so important, and is going to give a whole new view of the menorah itself. And that is that we had 2 Torahs given to us. One Torah was the written Torah that was represented by the Torah in the temple. But there is also an oral Torah, a Torah Shebba'al Peh, a Torah that was never written down and was always oral. Eventually the Jewish people went into exile and it had to be written down because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah, the prince, he realized that if they didn't write it down, at least in cryptic fashion, which they did, it became the Mishnah. And then a couple hundred years later, it became the Gemara. And that is the Gemara we study. We call it the Oral Torah because it's used to discuss, to understand. So the Torah that was written down, the 5 books of Moses, is, if you will, the headlines. But the Oral Torah, which eventually became the Mishnah Gemara, becomes the explanation. It's the light that we shine on the written Torah to help us understand what's going on. The Torah says, say the Shema. Where do we say it? When do we say it? How long should we say it for? So many questions. The Torah says, eat matzah. Where do we eat matzah? How much matzah? When exactly? All these questions are were written as discussion form in the Gemara. And then eventually, my friends, it had to become part of daily life for us and is studied all the time. So the menorah is going to represent that higher, unseen level of Torah, the oral Torah, Torah Shebba'al Peh, and the Aron, the ark, which had the luchot, the tablets, and the first ever Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, of Moses, represents the written Torah. So already we're starting to see in the menorah something which is above the physical, something miraculous. The light of the menorah doesn't represent any old Torah, but represents the Torah of the spiritual unseen, the understanding, the ability for us to do mitzvot. That's what the Greeks went for. When they went in to the temple, my friends, they didn't just trash the place. They wanted to make a point. We want to defile the oil. This oil that you, the Jewish people, hold so special, that had the signature of the Kohen Gadol to say that it could be used in a purified state, that they smashed. And there was a battle, because eventually when two philosophies clash, as we see today, eventually it becomes a pitched battle. And this small band of priests, these Kohanim, the Maccabees, right? They came along and they said, we're going to have to fight. Because if we don't fight, no one's going to fight for us. And so they, as priests, stood up and they managed miraculously to fight a war, as we say in the Alanissim, of a few against the many. Now that itself was miraculous, a great miracle. But you know, that's not enough for people. Because in the end, you can take a small band of people, train them, make them work hard, teach them how to get involved in guerrilla warfare. That would make sense. But that's not going to be enough in order to prove that there's something much bigger happening right now in our story. And that had to be proved through a different way. So when the Kohanim, these priests, Matisyahu and others, went into the temple, they wanted, after routing and fighting off, as we said last week, the Greek army, they wanted to make a point. And the point they decided to make was to light the menorah again. But they did it, according to many opinions, in a very unusual way. Usually the menorah was lit indoors, inside the temple. They decided to go to the chatzeros, as we say in our prayers, and to light the menorah in full public view for everyone to see. Why? Why would they do that? And so they lit, some say they actually lit torches. And this lighting of the torches, my friends, that we replicate every single year is the light of spiritual survival that the Jewish people have had to create and endure for thousands of years. This small light of the menorah they lit and the Chanukah, the 8 lights that we light, every single night a new light is added on, represents the perseverance of spiritual attacks against the Jewish people, and that our light is never extinguished. And it's not enough for that to be sufficient. It needs to have a miraculous quality. And let me explain why. See, there's 2 types of miracle that we, the Jewish people, have experienced throughout Jewish history. One is called Nes Nistar, the miracle that is hidden. And what this means is that there are certain things that happen to us which are miraculous, but they're not for public view. We've all experienced things that we've said, wow, you know what? Something amazing happened. It was miraculous. I met someone, I heard something, I did something, and the outcome was just out of this world. That's Nes Nistar. That miracle is still with us. But there's another type of miracle, my friends, and that's called Nes Nigla, a revealed miracle. A miracle that goes against the forces and plans of nature, goes against everything that should happen. When the sun stays up in the sky for a little bit longer so that the Jewish people could fight off Amalek, when the sea split, when the Jewish people left Egypt, when the 10 plagues came to hurt and fight off and break the spirit of the Egyptians who had enslaved us for hundreds of years, these open miracles, Nes Nigla, are considered greater than the little private ones that we'll see in our lives, because they make what's called a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name. And when they come, they make a noise. There's thunder, there's lightning. The last open miracle that happened to the Jewish people was the following. When these Maccabees came out, they found 1 jar of oil. That in and of itself, according to many opinions, was miraculous. And they wanted to make a point. They wanted to say, you know what? For us, the Torah isn't just another document. It is a God-given spiritual light that has kept us going all these years and will keep us going to the end of history. And so they took this oil, which had inside it 1 day's worth of lighting the menorah. And as we know, what should have lasted for 1 day lasted for 8. And I mentioned this before. The way I explain this miracle to my children is you have enough battery for 1 day, and the battery in your phone lasts for 8 days. Now that, my friends, is how to describe the Chanukah miracle 2020. But there's so much more, my friends, so much more. Because this light that miraculously lasted for 8 days has become the focal point of our people for the thousands of years that we've been around since this event in Jewish history. You see, the Greeks have come along, like many others, as we said last week, to darken the spiritual light of the Jewish people. But we say Yisrael Chai, and there is no better object that existed in Jewish history more than any other symbol than the menorah. The menorah represents the soul of the Jewish person that flickers on. You know, I have in my neighborhood, we have a few non-Jewish neighbors, wonderful people, and they really light up their gardens for Christmas. I mean, they're sucking all the electricity. When they turn the Christmas lights on, all the lights in my neighborhood start to flicker as the electricity is being sucked out. And yet here we are on Chanukah, and what's our light? Just a little flame in the window so everyone can see it that shines out. What's the difference? What's the difference? One is there, you see, I'm here, I'm going to push my light onto you. But the Jewish view is very, very different. The Jewish view is there's a small light, a light of wisdom, a light of connection to God, the light of Torah, the hidden, higher, elevated Torah, the Oral Torah. And this light says, if you want it, it's here for you. The door is open. The menorah is lit. The donuts are on the table, as are the chocolate coins. If you want it, you can come and learn everything you need to, because the Torah belongs to everyone. And so we take this light and we put it in our windows. This is unusual. There's no other mitzvah that I can think of where we deliberately do it in public. What's called in Hebrew, Pirsume Nisa. You don't have to eat your matzah in public. You don't have to put your sukkah in public. You can hide them away somewhere. And yet when Chanukah comes, there is a Jewish pride of this connection with God that the Greeks try to destroy, as did the Romans, as did the Babylonians, as did the Assyrians, as did the Nazis. And we take this light and we put it in public and say, you know what? We are proud. We're not going to shine this light in your face, but we are very, very proud people. And we're going to put this light in the darkness. So this final miracle, final revealed miracle before the Messianic age, when revealed miracles will return, God willing, this small miniature light has been with us for thousands of years and has kept us going. Because when the spiritual world broke down, my friends, and the revealed miracles stopped at that time, all we have left to take us through the darkness of exile from Greek times to Messianic times is that one small light. The connection to God, connection to Torah, and the connection of the everlasting soul of a Jew. And that's why the soul of a person is actually compared to a light. King David tells us that the light of the flame represents the soul, and that's why a flame flickers. And when we pray, we actually go backwards and forwards. We flicker as the soul inside us flickers as well. Let's talk about 8, because 8 seems to be a major theme of this holiday. Why does this holiday last 8 days? If we're so grateful about this battle and the fact we had to push the Greeks out, really wanted to hurt us physically and spiritually and psychologically and emotionally, so why exactly do we celebrate for 8 nights? Wouldn't 1 night suffice? I mean, most of the holidays are 1 or maybe 2 nights, and suddenly an 8-day holiday? Wow, that's a lot of presents. And the answer to this is numerous, but I'll give you more of a surface answer and then a deeper answer. The surface answer is that they put enough oil for one day inside the menorah. That's what they lit up. And then they needed to wait for new oil to be prepared. So one opinion was that the oil would take 4 days to pick up and 4 days to return. That takes a total of 8 days. And so when it came to the practical challenge of having oil, the oil that they found needed to last for 8 days till new oil could be pressed. Some say actually because they were fighting in war, it would take a week for the impurity of the war to leave them, for them to go back in and light the menorah inside the temple grounds themselves. So different opinions. But what does the number 8 represent? And we've spoken about this before when we discussed the holiday of Shmini Atzeret, which is the culmination and the end of Sukkot. The number 8 has a lot of depth to it. The Hebrew word for 8 is Shmona. If you rearrange the letter Shmona, which means 8, you get Hashemen, the oil, which represents the olive oil, and oil itself, which always separates and goes up. And if you rearrange it again, you get Mishnah. Mishnah is the first oral Torah that was ever written down. Rearrange the letters again and you get Neshama, soul. And that's the flickering soul that's inside every single Jew, waiting to connect to their higher source, God. So the number 8 represents a connection between the lower world and the higher world. Think about it. The number 7 represents this world, right? 7 represents 7 days of the week, 7 colors of the rainbow. There are 7 strings in the harp in the temple, right? But 7 always represents this world, Olam Hazeh. Okay? So 7 is a this world thing. So 8 is one above 7. So it represents the infinite. It represents the miraculous, the supernatural, which for us, the Jewish people, is a real thing. We connect to God on a 7 level. That's why we keep 7 days of the week, right? Which culminates with the Shabbat. And we go back to 1 again. But 8 is going to represent the miraculous. And that's why a baby boy, as my friend today had a Brit Milah for his son, happens on the 8th day. And the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would wear 8 garments because he had an elevated spiritual position above all else. And the inauguration of the temple happened on the 8th day. And there were 8 poles that carried the kalim. That's things that could lift up the mundane and make it higher and greater. When the Messiah comes, there's going to be an 8th string, says the Talmud, the Gemara, to the harp in the temple. There's going to be another octave, some say, as we live a higher form of life. So 7 represents Olam Hazeh, this world, and 8 represents Olam Haba, the next world, the higher world, the world of the supernatural, the miraculous. And that, my friends, is what the Greeks wanted to remove. They didn't like 8. They didn't like the idea of infinite, right? They didn't understand the world came ex nihilo. For them, the world always existed, and there is no primary creator. It just is. And we can take the world, we can measure it and understand it and appreciate it even. Art and music. And we, the Jewish people, love that too. But we say, but what's the cause? What's behind it all? Is there a purpose? Are there meaning? Is there values that come with this world? Or is this world just a beautiful world we enjoy and then disappear forever? And we, the Jewish people, say, no, it doesn't work that way. Right? There was nothing, there was something, right? Which now the world accepts, right? We call it the Big Bang. But we Jews have been saying it for thousands of years. There was a beginning. There's a creator. There is a chaos, but there is an order as well. And you can find order in this world, and you can find meaning and values, right? When you reach up to a higher spiritual plane by connecting to God. So we, the Jewish people, are trying to sandwich these worlds and connect the lower worlds and the higher worlds. And the menorah and the light of the menorah represented this. And that's all represented by the number 8. And so we have a special holiday of giving thanks to God for this amazing miracle of managing to remove the Greeks. And we managed to keep them out for a long time. It wasn't until the Romans came up 200 years later the temple was eventually destroyed. But we had a good run. We had a really good run. But the light of the menorah is still with us to this very day. And so we spend 8 days celebrating Chanukah. And how do we do it? Well, really the only real mitzvah we have, besides praying, saying Hallel, which is an extra prayer for miracles that happen in the land of Israel, we also light the menorah. Now, there are different opinions as to exactly how to light the menorah. Basically, you fulfill the mitzvah by lighting one candle every single night for 8 nights. Does anybody know anyone that does that? No, because there's a higher level called Mahadrin. And Mahadrin is that one light is lit for every member of the household every single night. So if there's 4 people in the household, right, parents and 2 children, for example, 4 candles will be lit every single night in the Jewish home. Okay? If there's 9 members, then 9 candles. Has anyone seen anyone do that before? No, because there is an even greater way of doing it. And that actually is what we call a machloket, a dispute among 2 great Jewish scholars, Hillel and Shammai. And Hillel says the best way to light the menorah, what's called the Mahadrin min Mahadrin, the most beautiful way, is that on the first night you light 1 candle. On the second night you light 2 candles, 1 to represent yesterday and 1 to represent the new candle. On day 3 you light 3 candles. You sound familiar, right? All the way to 8. And that's what we do. But did you know there's another opinion that we don't presently use? And that is the opinion of Shammai. And he says, no. On day 1, you light 8 candles. On day 2, 7. Day 3, 6. And you decrease until the last night of Chanukah, you end up with 1 candle. That is the dispute. Is it 1 to 8, Hillel, or 8 to 1, Shammai? Now, most arguments, nearly all of the arguments from Hillel and Shammai, we actually side with Hillel. We go with Hillel. Hillel's opinion in most, besides 5 or 6 disputes, where we go with Shammai, we actually go with Hillel. But what is the dispute really all about? What are they arguing about? What's the big deal? 1 to 8, 8 to 1. So if you look at Hillel and Shammai, you see some very important information that is actually hidden inside this dispute. And actually, if you look at other disputes that I've looked into, you'll see that really they're arguing about a way of looking at life and spirituality. One is potential in something, and one is actualization. Potential and actualization. You see, Shammai is saying, you know what we want? We want to start big because we see great potential. But you know what? Potential isn't always fulfilled. So let's break it down a little bit to 7. And let's break it down a little bit more. And we're going to end up with 1. We're going to end up with 1 person that's really going to do a great job. A very famous story that many of you may have heard, which really represents this idea, is Hillel and Shammai and the convert. And a convert came in to see Shammai and said, Shammai, I want you to teach me the Torah standing on 1 foot, which is an ancient way of saying, teach me everything I need to know about the Torah, just sum it up in 1 expression. And Shammai got very upset, almost insulted, and removed him from the Beit Medrash where he was studying. He then went to Hillel and said, I want to convert, but can you summarize all of Judaism in 1 simple saying? And Hillel thought about it and said, yeah, what you don't like being done to you, don't do to others. Like others like you love yourself. The rest of Torah is all commentary. Go learn. And he did go learn. And he did convert and became a very, very great holy convert to Judaism. What's this about? Shammai wasn't mean. Shammai is the one who tells us elsewhere in Jewish writings to accept people with a big smile on their faces. That's Shammai. So Shammai, people say, oh, he's such a mean, nasty person. No, 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 no. There's a philosophy behind here. And the philosophy of Shammai, which we see in the menorah, as well as that little story, is that, you know what? We want excellence. We see great potential. But I can't just summarize in one go. We need to find the 1 person out of 8, the 10 out of 1,000, the 100 out of 50,000, right? Who's going to come along and lighten up our world. We see potential, but most people don't have it. So let's break it down to its core essence, because one can fix it for everybody. And Hillel was like, no, that's not going to work. That's not what is going to get the Jewish people through our exile. You know what's going to work? Building up. Day 1 is one light. But light has an amazing power. You can have many things in this world and give to other people, but then you'll have less. I can have a big barrel of water, give you some and you some and you some, and I'll have less. Everything in the physical world diminishes the more I give of it. But Torah does not. Torah increases when you teach it yourself and for the recipient. And that is light, isn't it? I can have a candle. I can give 1,000 people light from my candle, from my fire, and I'm not diminished in any way whatsoever. And Hillel was saying that we need to start a chapter of history with as many lights as possible. Maybe the lights aren't as great. It could well be. And maybe the giver isn't as great as giver as he could be. And maybe the recipients aren't as great, but each one represents a different neshama. And we need to build and build and build in order to gather together as many holy souls as possible to illuminate this world, because every single flame is important. Every single letter in the Torah is important, and every single soul among the Jewish people is important as well. And so we do something really weird. We take this Jewish pride and we build up every day more and more until we reach the 8th level, the supernatural, and we put them into our windows and we publicize as if to say they want to diminish us and extinguish our spiritual light. And at the darkest time of the year, at the darkest time of the day, just when everyone is going home and the marketplace is full and the streets are full and everyone's been around, we light to bring light into darkness. So the menorah represents the illumination of Torah, our connection to God, and every single soul that has existed right through Jewish history. That, my friends, is the secret power of the menorah. And the Rambam tells us, and as far as I know, I'm not such a big Torah scholar, unfortunately, but as far as I remember, this is the only mitzvah that the Rambam describes, lighting the menorah nerot, which you should light with preferably oil, if not a long candle that lasts in your window. And it's the only mitzvah the Rambam Maimonides describes as chaviva ad ma'od, a very special mitzvah. My second daughter, who should live and be well, was born on the 8th night of Chanukah, or the 7th. Well, she was born on Chanukah for sure, and we named her Chaviva, without even realizing that's what the Rambam describes. And she is actually a very, very special light. And so we're about to enter, God willing, on Thursday night, 8 days of miracles. That means we've entered a time of miraculous nature, and God knows we all need it with what's happening in the world today. It's a very special time to light those lights and just to look at them. You can't even use them. You can't use them to illuminate the room. You're going to use other lights for that. Shabbat lights, you can. But menorah lights, they're important. And therefore, when you light those candles, just sit for a short amount of time, 30 minutes, and meditate on them. And we're told that there is no better way to bring holy generations from us than by having beautiful menorah lights sitting in our windows, illuminating the spiritual darkness that surrounds all of us all the time, especially where we are today in history, when so many people want to remove the spiritual light of God and are proud about it. And we, the Jewish people, say, you're proud about your darkness. We are proud of the light that we illuminate the world with through our Torah and performing our mitzvot. And so if there's one time of year that you want to pray really, really hard, I can't say pray for miracles because that's not really permitted, right? another discussion. We don't pray for miracles, but pray for God's light to illuminate us and to give us clarity, which is the greatest blessing of all. This, my friends, is the time for it. Chanukah 5781 2020 is the time. I wish you all tremendous success and blessings from your menorah. Tomorrow, 12 o'clock, we'll have a class. Next Tuesday night, I will take a break. There'll be no class next Tuesday night, but tomorrow night, myself and the other wonderful rabbis, Rabbi Fahim, Mizrahi, and Abragamov, will be giving a special tribute to Mr. Safra. It's going to be live, coming from the Safra Synagogue. Right, if you could join us live or online, we'd love you and be honored for you to join us. Please do, as we go a little bit deeper into what Chanukah represents today and uplighting. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Chanukah.